It's time that we can talk about Deadlock finally. The moment I've been waiting for months is finally here. I'm super excited to share it with you. Hey, and welcome. So I'm Hammy, and as of literally last night, Valve have dropped the curtain on what was an open secret for a while and introduced Deadlock to the world, their new game. So in this video, I'm just going to do a little Deadlock 101. What it is, why should you be excited, should you be interested, how does a game flow, what are the heroes like, what is the world building? What is the lore potentially going to be like? Anything else that we know, and much, much more. So time codes are in the description below along with topics if you want to skip around, and a quick emphasis that this game is still in very early testing and development. A lot could change, the look and feel, and a lot of the mechanics that we're talking about here. So when you see some blunt edges, a bit about the graphics and things in the game, the shop for example, bear in mind that this is early and a lot of this is going to get polished and developed as it comes along. But the core of the game is here that we can certainly have a look at. Alright, let's get stuck in. So, first things first, I've really been enjoying this game, but what is Deadlock? Well, I think the easiest way to sum it up is if you stuck together a little bit of a MOBA, a Dota, a League of Legends type game, maybe even a Smite if you played that, and you mashed it together with a third-person shooter. Now, I'll go through some highlights of the game as a part of this video with various phases of the game, so you can see a little bit where I can explain the sort of similarities and differences, and where Deadlock is a bit more like a MOBA and a bit more, of course, like a third-person shooter with its mechanics. If you haven't watched my previous video, just a quick bit of context, the game has been cooking at Valve for a while in various different forms. It has been known as Neon Prime in the past, had a very futuristic vibe, a lot more neon, a lot more sort of cyberpunky near futury. It's also been known as Citadel, but they've locked down on Deadlock, no pun intended, from earlier this year, and since May or so this year there has been a gradually growing invite only, friend referral only closed piece of testing which I've been on for the last few months. The number of people playing has been expanding to the point where Valve have literally just said you can talk about this game. So chances are you know a friend that's in and can invite you, so just give them a shout. You are in teams of 6v6 battling on a pretty big map, or a pretty big feeling map. It has 4 lanes. You level up your character's power both in terms of levels, accessible abilities and items through farming, creeps and getting a currency called souls. You use all of your power that you gain to push tower type objectives in a MOBA style. There are 3 lines of, broadly speaking, base defenses throughout the map, and then there are some shrines, and then there is a patron at the end as like the core that you would kill in any other MOBA. Travel around the map has a few different ways. There are teleporters that can teleport you from one side of the map to the other, and there are also these fast travel rails that extend as far as your NPCs, your creeps in your lane, have pushed out to a particular point. Now, although it hasn't been confirmed, IceFrog, legendary developer of Dota even before Dota was a Valve thing, has been at work on this, and you can certainly see a lot of Dota inspirations in Deadlock. So that's broadly speaking the objectives of, or the structure of a game, but how does gameplay actually feel? Well, as a third-person shooter MOBA, think of a combination between, say, like Smite, and maybe an older game, going to show my age here a bit, but go back to 2010 or so, a game like Monday Night Combat, or any third-person over-the-shoulder type shooter that you might play. The differentiating factor with Deadlock compared to some of these games I've mentioned is its verticality. In Smite, for example, your camera is locked at a particular angle, and with only certain characters in the game being able to jump over and traverse the various scenery between the lanes, it means that really it's kind of almost a top-down game. Deadlock has many characters that can not only leap high in the air, but can also fly in the air for certain periods of time, and much, much more. So verticality, that y-axis, and whether people are in the air or on the ground is very much a thing in this game. It's worth noting, by the way, that camping on roofs of buildings is prevented by design of the map that has these electrical aerials that if you stand too close to them for too long a period of time, they do a lot of damage to you. So camping discouraged, moving around in the air, however, very much encouraged. Now, because it's a shooter, there is of course the question of aim versus abilities and ease of access against skill ceiling. Now, make no mistake about it, in this game, aim definitely helps. This is certainly not your grandpa, your grandma, or your grandparents' tactical shooter. Those familiar with tracking aim, such as in Overwatch, will be more than at home here. That said, there are a few characters with a few sets of abilities that will be a bit more familiar to those who would like to play a broadly more supportive kind of role. Some characters are absolutely more snipery, absolutely more reliant on fast movement and therefore quick aim than others, but there are initiating characters. I, for example, played quite a bit of two characters called Abrams and Professor Dynamo. Professor Dynamo literally jumps in and does a Zarya-like, obviously Overwatch background type of black hole, sucking in people around him and crowd controlling them in his area. There is a Hispanic gargoyle character called Ivy, who, for example, has heals and various beams and flying as a part of her kit. She can pick up other characters and move them around. She can, of course, be played with a damage build with damaging items, but she has a lot of inherent things in her kit that kind of make her quite supporty as well. There is certainly a way in for players who may not have absolutely cracked and jacked mad aim, and if you're coming from an Overwatch style background, you'll certainly find things familiar to you here. Now, if you're thinking so far so familiar, there are a bunch of things here, kind of Dota inspired and sort of MOBA inspired, but particularly from Dota, that make Deadlock feel a lot different. Number one, the shop. A whole set of activatable items and different things that you can customize give you quite a lot of room in a Deadlock game with your character to tweak your build for the situation, for the enemy teams and heroes you might be facing, and for the kind of playstyle that you enjoy. A lot of these items are, by the way, also activatable with various effects. You might, for example, be able to cleanse and remove, very much like Kiriko's Suzu, different negative status effects on you. You might be able to jump very, very high in the air. And the ability to give any character a very, very big, high into the air Winston-style jump is a very, very interesting one. This is very much a Dota type thing rather than League of Legends or other MOBAs who don't have these activatable usable items. It can mean that you have a few more buttons to press and think about, but I played a chunk of Dota, over 1,800 hours, and one of the things that I really enjoy about Dota is the ability to tailor the items that you buy and tailor your character for a particular situation, even though it may be designed to fit a particular role. Now, in Dota, for example, you have to play 100 hours, I believe, before they'll even let you touch a ranked game. Because with Dota's 100 plus characters and all of these things to do with activatable items and nuance and how these characters all work together, like other MOBAs, they really, really want you, Valve, to make sure that you have at least a basic understanding of the game before you jump in. To be clear, I don't think Deadlock's barrier to entry is like 100 hours or anything like that. If you're familiar with playing a bit of MOBA, if you play team-based, hero-based, third-person or team shooters, otherwise, I think you can jump in, you can grab a default item build or one of the community-suggested ones, and get stuck in reasonably well. So I would encourage you to give it a go if you're on the fence. It may well surprise you. Now, in the early game, in terms of how currency, experience, and similar souls, in short, are earned, the game almost designs itself to bring you along with it to a degree in the early game, particularly if you're in a duo shared lane. But we'll now walk through some highlights of a simple game, not because I'm amazing, by the way. There is a little bit of MMR matchmaking in what is effectively a quick play mode right now. This is still in early testing, but the relative simplicity of the game lets you see what's going on a bit more clearly. High-level games, although they have pretty good visual clarity, can of course have so much going on and so many decisions being made, it's harder to see the core structure of the game. Now, before we jump into a game, I just wanted to quickly talk about the various heroes and characters, as well as the sort of world building and vibe and visual style and aesthetic of Deadlock. Now, to me, it's very, very Dead Omens, if you're either a fan of the TV series or Sir Terry Pratchett, who I'm a massive fan of. But let's take, I don't know, like a bit of sort of film noir, almost neo-noir, mix it with a fantasy setting, and mix it with maybe a little bit of steampunk as well. Now, I'm going to be doing lore videos. I've been looking at the lore for about the last couple of months, so hold fire for the first lore primer after this video. Hit subscribe, by the way, and hit like if you'd like to see that, if you'd like to learn more about the world. I do a lot of lore on this channel. Going to be getting stuck into Deadlock too. As a quick primer, Deadlock is set in a 1900s alternate universe where the supernatural walks among us. There are various gates around the world and various events that happen called maelstroms. Now, during a maelstrom, the barrier, as it were, between dimensions is a lot thinner, and this can cause various gates to spawn in the world, and then these are permanent fixtures where effectively the veil between Earth and other realities and other dimensions is a lot more thin. A particular maelstrom that happened 40 or 50 years or so ago in the lore was when the supernatural and the paranormal more broadly became a part of life on Earth. The Deadlock map is set in New York, and your goal in a game of Deadlock is effectively during one of these maelstrom type events, you're trying to get in contact with the patrons, a mysterious, powerful group of creatures, paranormal, supernatural creatures beyond our dimension and even beyond other dimensions and other worlds and realms that are connected to the Earth world of Deadlock. Now, your characters, you have weird robot-type creatures housing human souls. You have demons and infernals from other dimensions and other planets who have kind of just come to Earth and are making a home on Earth in a more sort of friendly, coexisting type way. You have supernatural spirits. You have ghosts killed in the Salem witch trials many hundreds of years earlier in the case of Vindicta. You have people who have done a deal with the devil or done a deal with various demons, and like Lady Geist, they are kept young forever, but at the cost of having to feed the locked demon locked into their arm and bound with a particular ward. Immortality in a sense, and at a price. Now, I'm not going to go through them now, but there have been leaks even before Deadlock was officially allowed to be talked about months and months ago that show that Valve have been working on effectively visual novels and a lot of story to perhaps go alongside a monetization system, maybe a battle pass or something in future, but very in-depth, fully voiced, beautifully drawn sort of visual novels explaining the background of the characters. So plenty of potential for lore and world building, a fun looking world. Very, very different, it has to be said, to a lot of the aesthetics that we've seen in team shooters, in live service games and things very, very recently. I personally really, really like it. I know it might not be everyone's cup of tea. Let me know what you think about it in the comments, but I think there's a lot of fun that can be had with these world and these characters, and something a little bit creepy, a little bit spooky, but grounded in a kind of reality is pretty, pretty cool. Heroes-wise, it's better to think of these characters a little bit more as sort of MOBA types of characters. You don't necessarily have like a tank, a healer, and a damage dealer. You very much have characters that are perhaps good at laning on their own. They're good playing in more of a supportive sense, not in a healing supportive sense, but in terms of supporting the team with various abilities. Ivy's Fly, for example, is a great one. As Seven, the character that I'm going to be playing as in my little gameplay demo in a little bit, showing the flow of the game, I have an ability that basically casts a huge expanding electric cloud that damages anyone within it. Combine that with Ivy's Fly, Ivy can fly me around while I'm doing my electric ult, doing lots of damage, and perhaps flying me over people who might be trying to line of sight and hide from it. So supportive characters in that sense as much as anything else. Broadly speaking, I would say you do have tanky type initiators, people with a lot of bulk, people who like fighting close range. Deadlock has not only a melee and a heavy melee that you can do as an attack, so two different strengths of melee attack, it also has parries where you can basically, if you time it correctly, parry someone else's melee attack and cause them problems doing so. But you broadly speaking have initiators. You do have your snipery, more long-range style type characters. Grey Talon and Vindicta can, with her ult, which is basically a sniper rifle, and Grey Talon with his long-range arrows and jumping and holding himself up in the air, give you that long-range type ability. You do have almost turrety, engineering style pivot characters like McGinnis. She can throw down turrets, she can throw down a healing field. Kind of think of a combination, let's say, of Torbjorn meets someone like the engineer from TF2, and maybe with a little bit of a Soldier 76 healing field thrown in with a siege long barraging ultimate as well. And you do have, I would say, broadly crowd control-y type, assassin-y type characters. Haze is a common one. Throw in a Reaper Death Blossom style ult with the ability to become ethereal and jump and shift around. Paradox, a long-range railgun type sniper character with no zoom in or no big sniper style zoom in on that ability. And many, many more. I think there are 19 or 20 or so characters in the game right now, but with a whole bunch, not only in the files, but also to be discovered and being worked on as well, given that the game is early. So a lot of variety, a lot of fun to be had. So that's the game, that's broadly how it plays, that's a bit about the heroes, about the world, but let's jump into what a game looks like. Now, you've seen a lot of footage as I've been jumping around explaining it here. We're going to jump into what was a shorter, more simple game. At the moment, it's broadly a quick play mode. Now, you get thrown into either a single or a duo lane, broadly based on your ability, as far as I understand it, or how much skill you've displayed on a particular hero. So the game tries to broadly match you either in a single lane with someone of a broadly similar ability on the hero that they're playing, or if you're in a duo lane, it tries to match you based, again, on a combination of those things to make sure that lanes, broadly speaking, are fair. So here we're jumping into a game with Seven. Now Seven I would describe as a very straightforward damage dealer and farmer. He is recommended as one of the heroes, not too bad for newer players. He has some very dark lore, but I'll talk about that later. Probably a very evil person in the Deadlock universe. The 7 greatest mystics in the world could not contain him in the very, very bad supernatural prison he was being kept in, and he managed to break out when they were effectively going to try and scrub his soul from existing in any way, shape or form. A fate worse than death, most probably. Anyway, 7, to keep it simple, has basically 3 abilities, and then all heroes in Deadlock have an ultimate as well. Now, as you play the game, as you level up through soul acquisition, through kills and similar, your abilities get more facets and different things as you upgrade them, and once they're fully upgraded, they have a special effect. 7 is a pretty straightforward damage dealer. He has an ability that throws an orb. You can get multiple charges for this orb. The orb effectively does electric damage in an area. You have an ability that is effectively a stun when you cast it on somebody. You have a ability which is kind of a farming steroid and damage steroid, causing your shots to arc electricity to other characters within range. So more damage helps speed up that farming process. And then finally you have the ult that I mentioned before, the expanding sphere of electricity. So let's jump into a game, and phase 1, kind of the early game, the laning phase. So firstly, we're in lane here. Now I'm in a solo lane against this other character, Infernus, and if you played a MOBA, this should be familiar, but broadly speaking, you and your opponent or opponents in your lane are engaged in a little bit of a game of chess. Now you are trying to farm the mobs, the NPCs that are coming towards you. You do this by last hitting them. Now, you shoot them when they're low health, and if you shoot them when they're low health, and you can headshot these, by the way, you see a little soul orb pop up above them. Now, you need to shoot that orb to confirm your soul gain, to confirm your currency, your experience gain, effectively. Your opposing team in the lane can actually try and shoot that orb too, and if they shoot it, they do something called deny. They deny you from getting those souls, those experience. So you have a little back and forth. Are you shooting the enemy hero and trying to wear them down, push them out of the lane to make space so that you can farm? Are you perhaps making sure that you focus laser on last hits, making sure that you are getting all of the experience, all of that soul currency from your mobs or the enemy mobs that are coming towards you? Or are you perhaps trying to do a combination, trying to harass the enemy a bit? Are you trying to shoot and make sure you get your experience and deny the enemy experience too? And denying is very, very valuable, particularly in a duo lane as well. So you can already see that this shares a bit more, if you know it, from Dota. Dota has this denying mechanic, League of Legends does not. That shared Dota heritage from other games. And you can see the skill level, the technicality here. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking, I don't want to be in a 1v1 battle against someone for a bunch of time, or I don't like the sound of this, well, fear you not. If you're in a duo lane and if you queue in a party of 2 or more, very often you're going to get some combination of you to make sure that you can put yourself in duo lanes and things anyway. The important thing with Deadlock is that certainly in the early game, and of course this could all change, the XP that you gain is effectively doubled. So there is no penalty, unlike in Dota, if you have 2 people in a lane laning together. If a soul gets acquired, if you get that shot soul orb from killing one of the NPCs coming towards you, then both of you, providing you're close enough to each other and in the lane, have the same amount of XP earned from that. So there's no penalty. If I leave a duo lane, the person left in the lane on my team does not get more experience, as far as I understand it. So that encourages people to duo lane together, and if you're a new player, this is a good way of learning the game. It's worth also noting, by the way, that as a result, jungling is not sort of an individual role like it is in League of Legends. Jungling, if you're not familiar, is the concept of playing areas in between lanes on the map for experience, killing neutral camps of monsters that may be around. Deadlock does have these, by the way, in terms of additional experience that you can get, but pushing a lane out, killing your enemies in a lane, making sure that your wave of NPCs is going forward, and then farming those jungle camps is definitely a way of getting more ahead, or perhaps catching up if you're getting pushed out of lane in a tough matchup. As you see me back and forth in this lane, it's worth mentioning the shop and build. So of course there are items. Now in Deadlock you have basically a couple of different kinds of damage. You've got spirit damage or ability damage, and you've got bullet damage as well from firing your weapon, as it were. So you can get things that buff these in all aspects. You can get these that defend against these in terms of armors and resistances in all aspects. You can buy items that when you activate them will reduce resistances or increase resistances, cleanse bad effects, and many other things as well. Like Dota, it's worth mentioning these items that you buy in a shop can effectively be passives. They can be things that just upgrade your stats, your abilities. They can be actives, as I've mentioned, that give a particular effect too. So not everything you buy from the shop is a button that you have to press. You can sell items as you go through the game. Some items and some abilities that you buy here can be upgraded the more souls you have later in a game as well. And it's also worth mentioning that in any lane that you start with, there's a shop directly next to you. But if you lose your first guardian, your first tower, your first piece of defense, that shop despawns and you can no longer access it. There is also a shop in your base that you have to go back to as well. Finally, it's worth mentioning in Deadlock that there is just a shop in the underground area, and there's a reasonable underground to this map as well as the overground that you're seeing here. I don't go into the underground in this game, but there is just a general shop in the middle of the map, slightly underground, that anyone can access. But of course, if people go to it, it's very risky. You might find that you get jumped by the enemy team if you go there. I won't go into full details of items because that's probably a bunch of separate videos. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, you get playing the game, let me know in the comments. I'll see whether it's worth doing here or elsewhere. But there's a lot of customizability is the point, and you can build characters to a degree the way that you want to, but characters as they level up have certain stats, things like their health, their max health that they gain, things like their basic bullet damage, and even their melee basic hit ability. So as a character, as a hero grows, they have different ratios between those stats. A tanky character might gain more max health and may gain less bullet damage. A more glass cannon sniper character may gain more bullet damage per level and perhaps less max health, as a simple example. In this particular game, I was going towards a community-made build. The community can submit builds to the game, and if they are upvoted, then they can show up higher in the list when you have a look at them. That's very much a Dota-like mechanic and a Dota-like piece of functionality, by the way. So as a new player, you can broadly pick a guide and try and build the items towards that guide. It's good to have an understanding of items and understanding of how things work with your character, but to start with, you can absolutely pick a guide. So this one was a 7 ultimate guide, for example, revolving around making his ultimate have more range, more power, and making sure that he survives while he's actually casting it. As you can see in future footage, I'm very static and slow, basically just hovering in one place, and therefore a big target for the enemy. This lane went quite well against a newer player, to be fair, so you then get into a mid-game phase. Now, in the mid-game phase, when one or more guardians are down, you see the teams and players in various lanes starting to just roam. They can continue pushing in their lane to try and get the walker, the next big objective shown here, or they can start roaming and doing other things on the map. Now, around the map, there are boxes and crates you can destroy that can give you souls and little buffs. There are buffs that spawn on the map for various things at a particular period of time, very much like the red and blue buffs, say, of League of Legends. These can give you buffs to various different parts of your stats. There are a couple of other objectives that I'm showing here. Now, one of them is the Spirit Urn. Now, the Spirit Urn will sort of spawn on one side of the map and needs to be taken to the parallel shrine on the other side of the map here. Now, taking the Spirit Urn mutes you. You can't use abilities. You're effectively silenced. However, you are having a little bit of a speed buff as you move. So therefore, it's a good thing. Hopefully your team group up, go with you, and if you deliver that Spirit Urn, then you get a big bonus of souls for you and your team as well. So very, very useful there. Now, the second sort of mid-game objective that then starts spawning and can start spawning on a timer after they drop is the mid boss, as it's called. It's literally called mid-boss in game. So this has had various forms throughout testing. As of current recording, it effectively gives you a sort of respawn sort of buff. So if you die, then you respawn more quickly. At one point, I think it was instant respawn, and that was probably a little bit sort of imbalanced, so they changed it to this sort of quicker respawn. But this is very much an objective like Roshan in Dota, like Baron Nashor in League of Legends. Basically a big mid-game fight that both teams will probably contest. One will emerge victorious, and if a team emerges victorious and has that buff, then it's push, push, push time. Go and take objectives, try and get some more frontline guardians, try and get some walkers, and push in towards the enemy base. Now, Deadlock, although the map feels quite big, because of movement, which I will talk about now, you can move between lanes pretty quickly, as well as teleporters. You basically have a stamina meter. You can do double dashes. You can do jumps. You can mantle in this game by running to sort of a wall and holding spacebar and sort of climbing up things as well. So there is a lot of movement even before any activated items like the giant leap that I mentioned earlier. So Deadlock has a big chunk of movement in it alongside other things. You have characters like Kelvin, who can effectively make an ice slide, that make a path of ice that goes up into the air that he runs along and can stand and fight on. He can cancel. He can go sideways with it as well, and teammates can actually run up this ice path as well. So movement outside of just the basic hitting spacebar, as well as sliding down slopes a bit more quickly and dropping from the air to the ground a bit more quickly if you hit certain keys, are all things that you can learn as you go along. So, rapid movement combined with the size of the map and various different things mean that rotating between lanes and helping people can be pretty fast and quick. You need to be aware there are no wards in this game like in MOBAs, like items that you can stick up that show you when a hero is rotating. Looking at the minimap every now and then is key. All of these things make your mid-game quite a hectic time where you'll group up with other players a bit more if you're in a solo lane, or when if you're ahead, you'll start roaming to try and help other people get more ahead, start snowballing that advantage. And certainly, if you haven't been doing it already, a lot more player versus player fighting than perhaps previously in the laning phase. Worth noting as you go through the mid to late game, as you take down the first Guardian, as you take down the first base Guardians as well, and indeed Shrines, you get additional slots called flex slots in your loadout effectively that you can buy more items in. So the more progress you push forward in terms of objectives on the map, particularly the first of a particular line of defenses that you kill, the more ability you have to make your character more powerful by just having more room to buy abilities and items in your loadout. And last but by no means least, we have, of course, the late game. So no surprise, pretty much by this stage, one team is sieging one team's base or the other. The team on the back foot is trying to play their way back into it, probably by maybe getting the mid-boss, farming a little bit close to their base, pushing out lanes and trying to win sort of uneven team fights, making sure that there are a lot more of you than there are of them. Now, a caveat here, a lot of this can change. Gameplay-wise, as of now, compared to particular examples like me playing Dota, it feels like in the early to mid game, the advantage can snowball quite a bit. If one team is hard taking objectives, pushing that first line of Guardians, pushing those walkers and getting a lot of map space, and if they take that space and they're able to farm, it seems like you can snowball relatively quickly. Now, what do I mean by snowball? Take an advantage and make that advantage bigger, make it stack up. In Dota, there are various comeback mechanics, like, for example, if I'm on a massive killing spree, 10 people killed, and then the enemy team kill me, they get a lot of money, a lot of gold, and I can use that to buy items and get myself back in, for example. So in Deadlock at the moment, it feels like there aren't quite as swingy comeback mechanics as in Dota. Now, some people hate the way that Dota games can swing so much, even if a team has been dominated for a large period of time. If they kill one hero that's on a big killing spree, then that gives the team so much gold they can, really come back into the map. There's no sort of inherent automated baked in comeback mechanic. Teams have to group up, they have to play smart, which has absolute benefits for sure. Now, of course, this is my low level of gameplay based from the amount of time that I've played. I'm by no means a top 0% Dota worldwide type player, but if that does exist, it doesn't feel as marked as in other games that I play right now. The other thing with Deadlock is that if you are behind, you really need to focus on getting souls and playing so that you can get items to get caught up. One thing I notice is a lot of tankiness and resistance with certain characters. Now, of course, if someone is going, for a very, very strong bullet damage build, you can buy bullet armor and defend against them. You can also check their armor, check their items, like physical and magic resistance in other MOBAs. If they have lots of physical armor, then you can build magic items to try and make sure that magic spirit items, your spirit abilities or your team spirit abilities, can try and punch through their tankiness. It does feel though that if a team gets a lead and they have a lot of, damaging sort of buffing abilities and a lot of sort of tankiness in terms of their armor and protections, it can be hard to come back from. But one can argue that if a game is snowballing that hard or that mismatched, then you'll see this in other MOBA type games anyway. So it's a gut feeling as I've started, and numbers balancing is all very, very much in flux at the moment. So this could well have changed even by the time that you play it. If you're watching this video and you get in it in say a few days or a week's time, could have changed by now as well. So there's always a way back. Don't quit if you have a rough laning phase, particularly if you're in a duo lane, because of course those shared souls, that shared leveling up, that shared power, that shared ability to buy things is something that two of you can work on together very effectively. And if you get into the enemy base, you kill the Guardians, you kill the two shrines protecting the patron. The patron then has two phases, so you can shoot it out of its first phase, and then when you shoot it through its second phase, then it can regenerate some health and some protection. But that's it, that's the game done. How long do matches last? I've had stomp matches where I've lost or my team has stomped be about 15-20 minutes, but that's a real uneven stomp. Generally speaking, in the beta or in the closed alpha, matches have been anything from 30 minutes to an hour. And that could be very much tweaked as Valve play with balance and various bits and bobs. So take that as a rule of thumb. It's not super quick, but you can have a relatively quick game if it's a very, very hard-fought game. And to be very, very blunt with you, if one team or the other does not know how to end a game, if they don't know how to deliver that killing blow, then matches can drag on for a bit longer. Generally speaking, once a team has snowballed and got a particular advantage, unless it's very, very close or one team really has no clue how to just end the game, then you'll have a game that's sort of, I'd say 25 to say like 40-45 minutes at the very, very longer stage of things. So there we have it. That's Deadlock at the moment. So just to be super clear, I'm really enjoying this game, not being paid, nothing like that. It scratches several of the itches. I like to compete. I like having those sort of little skill challenges. I like having games that have a little bit of, cerebral nature to them, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of ways that you can out-strategize, you can out-itemize, you can use the characters that you have to sort of outwit and tweak around and adapt to the enemy team as well. This game very, very much has that. So yeah, having a great time with it so far. What do you think of Deadlock? Let me know in the comments. Do you like the look of this? Have you been playing it? What do you think about it? If you haven't played it, would you like to give it a go? And last but not least, again, I'm enjoying it. I don't know whether I'll do content, more of it here or perhaps on a new channel. We'll see. I will absolutely do a lore video. That's something I really, really enjoy. But if you'd like to see other content, let me know what you'd like to see in the comments below as well. Really, really fun. Give it a go, find a friend who can invite you into it, group up with a friend, give it a go for a bit, and if I had one piece of advice to you, get stuck in, try a few different characters, go into all of the tutorials and all of the training range stuff, because that's pretty cool. It's a good way just to get into it, particularly if you haven't played MOBAs before, and give it a few hours. Give it a few hours. You can absolutely see the fun from the beginning if this is your kind of thing, but it requires a little bit of getting into, but I don't think that's a bad thing, in the similar way that, for example, if you played League of Legends or Dota, it takes you a little while to get acclimatized, but don't let that put you off. There's a really fun game with a lot of depth. I can see the skill ceiling that I'm miles away from here at the moment, and from watching some good players, some pro players from other games who have jumped into this. You can publicly spec a bunch of games, much like you can in Dota. You can go and have a look at just high-level games or very viewed games in the client. So you can go and watch other people playing as well and see how they're playing things too. Right, there we go. That is a half-hour introduction to Deadlock. If you like this video, throw a like, subscribe, really, really helps me out. Comment what you think in the comments below. It's been great to have you with us. A bit different from the Overwatch content. I've been doing some different content. Check out, of course, by the way, my Marvel Rivals content here. Been enjoying that game too. All of my Overwatch, Valorant, lore, story interactions, and voice content here to do with comics, animated shorts, and everything. I love world building, but I also love playing games. So if you enjoyed this, you'd like to see more gameplay-wise on Deadlock or otherwise, let me know what you'd like to see in the comments below. And if you're a regular watcher for the last, well, nearly 8 years or beyond, or however long you've been here for, let me know what you think of the new content. I'd really appreciate that too. Cheers for tuning in. I've been Hammy, and take it easy. See you soon.